And so what I want to talk to you about today is communication. Specifically, communicating something in a post-everything world. We live in a post-everything world. It's a fascinating time in history, this time that we live in right now. We are transitioning from the modern era, which I'm going to explain a little bit later, but basically it started in about 1500 and it's come up to somewhere after the Second World War, and we are in a process of moving to something beyond that. Something that is postmodern. It's post-industrial, it's post-structural, it's post-colonial, it's post-evangelical, it's pretty much post-beyond and moving on from everything that is modern. Now, we don't entirely know what it's going to end up looking like yet, because we're still relatively at the beginning of the process. But this is a fascinating time to be alive. The times they are changing. We are moving to something new, and this time for the church is terrifying. Because with all of these postmodern ideas come things like relativism. Like there is no absolute truth, and what's true for you can be true for you, what's true for me can be true for me, and that's so fine, all fine. So we've taken away anything absolute, and that kind of freaks us out a bit as Christians. And we see people drifting away from the church, and we don't want them to go, and so it's a scary time. And there are lots of very negative things that come along with postmodernism, and I need to acknowledge those, but we're not going to be talking about them today. Because I actually think it's a really exciting time to be alive. And here's why. Because if we can get our heads around what it is to be in this postmodern world, if we can tap into the way that people are thinking and viewing the world, we find that it is a time full of opportunities. And that's why I'm excited to be here talking to you today. Because you are creative people. You are the people who have ideas, who think outside the box. You are people who make stuff happen. And we need creative people to take us to somewhere new with the way we communicate with the postmodern person. As Christians, we have the most important message ever that needed to be communicated. We have hope, don't we? We do? I do. I hope you do. And I hope that you feel passionate about wanting to share it. As our world is heading somewhere new, so the ways that we express our faith needs to expand to keep up with the world that we are in. What worked 50 years or even 20 years ago is not necessarily going to work today. So I don't know what your area of ministry is. I've only just arrived. I really don't know many of you at all. But whether you are working inside the church or outside the church, or up the front of a group or in amongst a group or as a helper, or whatever your capacity in ministry, I'm guessing that you have to work with people. They're pretty much unavoidable. Sometimes we wish that we could avoid them, but you will have to work with people, and so that means you have to communicate. So I hope that this subject is something that will be important to you. Now, have you all got the handout, and have you got a pen so you can write stuff down as we go? Nope. This man has not got a handout. Okay, good. Everyone's got a handout, you've got something to write. Because I am going to give you some information as we start with. Here's the plan. This is kind of where we're going. We're going to think about, we know, we're going to think about it as a map. We know that we want to get to Jesus, right? We know that we want to have a relationship with Jesus, and that our aim in the end is to help as many other people as we can get to Jesus. So we know where we're heading, but for a map to work, you first have to know where you're starting from. Right? Otherwise it doesn't really work very well. So we have to figure out where we are in order that we can work out how to get from there to Jesus. So we're going to talk about how did we get to where we are now, and then we're going to think about where actually it is that we are now. That is the postmodern era and what that looks like. Then I'm going to give you a chance to have a little talk amongst yourselves, because you might be ready for a break by then. And then we'll come back and talk about the practical applications of this. So that's where we're heading. How did we get here? Here we go, whizzing through history. In the Greek and Roman period, truth was found by asking questions. Have you heard of the Socratic method? Socrates says we just ask questions and we have dialogue and truth will emerge from that. I'm just going to rush over this, like I said. Very simple, but keep that in your mind. That's how they found truth. And so at the end of the classical period, the church is becoming a really important force and the Roman Empire is falling to bits and we transition into a different way of thinking. That's the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages or the pre-modern times. Any of those things will do. In the pre-modern times, truth is found in the Bible and the Bible is mediated to you via the church. So the priest tells you what that means and what you do with it. So all of life revolved around the church. It is the centre, it is the authority on everything. People were very religious and very superstitious. They absolutely believed that there were unseen forces in the world. There's a spiritual realm, there's a physical realm, and that one would impact the other. They understood that full human existence required faith. Life is very simple. Life is largely agricultural in this time. Now, if we go to 1500, a voice emerges against that thinking and we see some changes happening in the world. Who knows who that is? Yes. So why have I put up a picture of Luther? Do you know that? Martin Luther. What did he do? The Reformation. So we've got the Reformation happens. That means people are starting to question the authority of the church. So that's a pretty key thing in history. You've got the Renaissance going on. That's where people started digging up all those ruins from ancient Greece and Rome, and they started thinking about how the Greeks and Romans thought about stuff, and so that impacted their thinking. And we've got inventions. This is a time of inventions that would lead to the Industrial Revolution. Does anyone know what that one is? It's a printing press. That changed the world, changed the way that we got our information, made information so much more accessible to people. So you've got those things and a whole lot of other things that between about 1500 and 1650 bring about this huge change in the world. And there's a change in the way that people thought that went on at that time too. It starts with E. Does anyone know what it is? E-N? Thank you, the Enlightenment. There's four key words you need to know about the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment said that there is such a thing as absolute truth. So absolute truth is truth that is true for all people at all time. So 1 + 1 = 2 is an absolute truth, right? That's always going to be true. I'm cold is true for me right now, but not necessarily for anybody else, right? Follow me so far? So the Enlightenment said there is this thing called absolute truth, and what's more, it is possible for the human mind to know it. We can know it, we can have knowledge. It was a time of really humanism, and the human mind was recognised as a really powerful thing. So the human mind could know this truth, and the way that they would know this truth was by reason. So if we applied logical steps of calculation and observation, we would be able to, just by the human mind, unlock all the secrets of the universe. And as a result, there would be progress. Mankind would move forward and the world would be a better place because of what human beings could achieve. So, in the medieval period, it's the church that has the voice of authority. As we come into the modern period, it's science and maths and things like that that have the voice of authority, and they come to us via reason. See, faith can't be proven by reason. So truth at this point, faith at this time becomes something that's your own private affair. That's your own private business, and so it kind of gets segregated off from life. Precision is seen everywhere in the modern time. If you look at the music, you see beautifully balanced, neat, tidy phrases. If you look at the buildings, you see them all beautifully symmetrical and balanced. You see the precision in the factories that emerged. And what happened with the factories emerging is that people left their agricultural life and they moved to the city. And so they cut ties with their community and their land and their family. Religious and community traditions were replaced by routines and regulations of the industrial world. Is everyone with me so far? Have you learnt something? Is this stuff you know? But here's the thing with modernism. It promised that through the human mind and the powers of reason, we would make progress in the world and the world would be a better place. But you know what? It did not deliver on its promise. If we follow reason through to its height, we arrive at the Holocaust. They got there by reason. If you follow science through to its height, you arrive at the atomic bomb. If we follow humanism through, we find that we have individualism, and that becomes consumerism, and we find that we're destroying the planet. And if you add to those things Watergate and Vietnam, you can understand why, in the decades after the Second World War, a voice arose against modernism. A voice that was cynical, a voice that said, well, what are we supposed to believe now? Who can we trust? This is the stuff we've always been told, and if we carry on like this, we will destroy ourselves and we will destroy our planet. There was a realisation that science and reason might not actually explain everything. Perhaps things can't be quantified and put into nice, neat boxes, and perhaps we've been asking the wrong questions all along. What about things like faith and imagination and intuition? And so it's that kind of thinking, that voice of cynicism and distrust and questioning things, that's what has led to this postmodern time that we are beginning to move in now. In academic writing, postmodern, the word is first used in the late 70s, but we know that from somewhere after the Second World War, we can certainly see it coming out in the way people were thinking. Of course, it's never that clear-cut exactly when these things start. On the whole, you would say that people who were born in the 70s and since the 70s are more likely to think like postmoderns, but some people will think like it in one way, and in another way they'll think like moderns, and and it's more complicated than that. But on the whole, the younger you are, the more likely you are to think like a postmodern. So that's how we've got here. Is that okay? Good, okay. So this place that is called postmodernity, what does it look like? I've got 5 things. Like I said, it's really hard to quantify, but there are 5 kind of ways in which we rebel against what modernism is about. Postmoderns don't like authority. Are there any postmoderns here that would agree with that? You probably won't want to admit it. They treat authority with great suspicion. Individuals and organisations, and on the whole, the more powerful the person and the larger the organisation, the more suspicious we are likely to be of you. Because they look back, sometimes I'm saying we and sometimes I'm saying they. I hope it's not confusing, because sometimes I think I'm postmodern and sometimes I think I'm not. But they look back over history and they say, look at the voices who had the power and how have they abused that power. And we still see it, don't we, in churches where we hear awful stories where people in power have abused that. And so they look at those people in power and go, you know what, they weren't so powerful, they were just ordinary. Why should I just give authority to someone just because of a position or a title that they have? Postmoderns are cynical and sceptical of authority, but the truth is they're cynical and sceptical of everything. Did you know that you can have a cynical building? This is a postmodern building. Does anyone know this building? It's the AT&T building in New York. And this building is making a joke. Hilarious, isn't it? Does anyone know what it's about? It's meant to be an old-fashioned grandfather clock, but it has been built to look broken. See the chip out of the top? Yeah, okay, so it's not that funny, but it's a building that is, it's poking fun, and this is typical of what we would expect for postmoderns. Here's another building. This is an art gallery in Paris. See, this is funny because it looks like it's not finished, and this is the first kind of thing like this. Moderns have everything nice and neat and tidy, and all of that structural stuff is on the inside. With postmoderns, it all hangs out everywhere. It does. Have you seen Facebook? So there you go. So even buildings are cynical for the postmodern. Postmoderns won't respect somebody back to authority now because you have a rank or letters after your name. So postmodernity has taken those traditional voices to which we've given authority and said, you're not so special. We're not just going to listen to you because you're in a position, and we brought them down to the middle. But what's happened because we have the internet is that we've brought every other voice up also to the middle. So what that means is that you can have your Harvard University lecturer, and he is presented to you on the same level as the crazy cat lady who's completely lost her mind. And that's what happens, isn't it? When you go and you look online, you have all of these different opinions presented to you on the same level, and you simply pick and choose what you like, which clearly can have some problems, but it actually does have some pluses as well. Okay, so they distrust authority. What's a meta-narrative? I have a lolly in my bag, actually. I was going to give a lolly to anyone who could tell me what a meta-narrative is, but I've left it in my bag. Yes, tell me, what's a meta-narrative? It is a big story. It is a big story that explains everything. A worldview, it's a way of making sense of the world. So, in medieval times, the Christian story is the overarching story through which we make sense of the world. In modern times, it's science and reason that helps us to explain everything in the world. Postmoderns would tell you it's ridiculous to think you can have one simple story that will explain everything. Their view would be to say that's oversimplifying, that's dumbing it down. And to a degree, we've done this. We've said, whatever the question, Jesus is the answer. Now, I like Jesus. I'm good with Jesus. And he is the centre of everything, but we have to be really careful not to oversimplify that. Postmoderns see that these big meta-narratives have been tools of those in power, and they've used them to oppress people. They've used them to say, this is the way we see the world, this is how we set it up as the norms for this society, and you need to conform to our big story, and if you don't, you're on the outside. And so they're seen again with suspicion. The postmodern isn't about finding a new big story. It's about the death of all big stories. They're all brought down, and then what happens is all the little stories come up. And we'll come back and we'll talk about that later. Postmoderns are disenchanted by certainty. They don't just reject the idea that absolute truth can be found. They don't think you can be certain about anything. They reject the idea that it exists at all and would rather see that truth has been constructed by a group. It's socially constructed. So what I mean by that is that if there's a group in one part of the world that says within our society we see this is the way that we treat the elderly, but in the other part of the world there's another group and they go, well, we treat the elderly like that, then that becomes the truth for that group. That's how they understand the world. Does that make sense? And what that means is that you can have a whole lot of groups then that all have their different version of truth. That means no one group is better than another group. It means I can't say my way is right and your way is wrong, doesn't it? That means everything suddenly gets very grey and very vague. And postmoderns are okay with that. They don't need it to be all tied up nicely. They would rather have only questions than to believe a lie. This came up just the other day as we were working through a form for a group that I'm in the gathering. We have often had just nice little boxes that we tick. Not anymore. It's not that clear cut. There's continuums and degrees of things, and people don't just fit. People are messy. One postmodern philosopher said, "Postmodernity relieves me of the need to be right and asks me only to be interesting." It's not about whether you're right, it doesn't matter. So here's just an illustration to show you the difference between a modern and a postmodern approach. Scooby-Doo, who watched Scooby-Doo as a kid? Yeah, or as an adult maybe. It's still on, I think. So Scooby-Doo is an example of a modern program. It starts out with a problem, and then you have these kids, and they sequentially, methodically work their way through the clues in a very modern way to reason through to an answer which is very nicely and neatly tied up by the end of the program. X-Files, not so much. It begins with an underlying suspicion. It uncovers elaborate conspiracies, and postmoderns love conspiracy theories. The conclusion is that life's mysteries are beyond our grasp. You know those programs? Mm-hmm. Right. So they're disenchanted by certainty. They're directed by self-interest. Now this is an interesting one because, you know how I said postmodernism reacts against modernism? In this area, it's not a reaction against, it's a continuation of. That individualism that started in the modern period actually has kept going, and that individualism has become stronger, and we have consumerism, and for postmoderns we live in a material world. Less is more. We want more stuff, don't we? We like our toys, we like our technology, we like our things, we like entertainment, and we want options. Pleasure seeking is high on the agenda for postmoderns. We want to feel good, and we feel that it is our right to. And yet we also know that with all of those things and all of those easy ways we have to communicate, we feel more isolated now than we ever did. There's a hopelessness about it, even though we have all this stuff. And in fact, this generation from kind of my age and younger are the first generation in hundreds of years to not be optimistic about the future. People my age and younger tend to not see their children as having a better life than the one they've had. If you think back to your grandparents and your great-grandparents, you will see that usually what's happened is that every generation has lived a little better than the one before. They've earned more money, they've driven a better car, they've had a better house, they've had a better education. For me today, I know the future is going to be hard for my kids. Will they ever own a house? By the time they've got the qualifications to get a job, how much money are they going to owe? And what is the state of the planet going to be like by the time that they go to have children? Postmoderns don't hold out a lot of hope for the future, and I think that kind of impacts why we enjoy the day that we have. The other thing about this self-interest is that because postmoderns can be quite self-centred, they, or perhaps I should say we here too, we believe we have things to say. We believe we have a voice and you need to hear it. And we want to participate and we want to contribute rather than just being told. We want to be involved in process. So we've seen a move from the lecture to the seminar. We've seen a move in workplaces from the boss just telling you what to do to consultative processes happening. We've seen a move from rather than learning by observation at a distance, that we learn by participation, questions, and by interaction. And here's my last point. There's a desire for community, which actually, if you're paying attention, kind of directly contradicts what I just said. And in postmodernity, that's okay, so that's good. We're allowed to have lots of voices and they can contradict each other. We can hold them in tension. There's this tension between the idea that I do want what I want. I've got stuff to say and it is about me, but at the same time, there's this realisation that I'm not the centre of the universe, and in fact, I'm a pretty small and insignificant part of it. The Enlightenment elevated the status of the individual. It cut family ties, it cut community ties, and over time, those nuclear families that came about in the Enlightenment have begun to break down. And there's this real sense of isolation. And the desire for many is to find security and a place to belong and be accepted. A place where there can be authentic relationships. And those are things that often don't happen naturally for postmoderns. They take time because we have difficulty with trust, because we're suspicious of everything. There's a longing to return to pre-modern ideas of living simply, living off the land, just being in community with each other. We want to be part of something that makes a difference and leaves the world a better place, but we just really don't know if we can. So there's my 5 points. My question is, do you see yourself in there somewhere? Were there bits in there where you thought, yeah, I see it like that, or maybe bits in there where you thought, no, actually, I don't see it like that at all? At all? I'm getting no reaction here. So hopefully, because I'm going to give you 5 minutes right now, and what I want you to do is I want you to talk to each other about what's just been said. Maybe about something that was new or interesting or something you want to disagree with. But would you think about yourself and where you see yourself as relating to those 5 points? Is that okay? All right, go have a chat. Hopefully you've been thinking about where you fit, if you relate more to modern, postmodern, whatever. I'm going to tell you a story about myself and then I want you to tell me how I see the world, okay? So I am involved at the moment in a debate with my doctor. About 3 years ago, I had cancer, hence the sleeve that I'm wearing. And when that happened, I looked into trying to be healthy. And one of the things that I changed in my life was that I became a vegetarian. So usually that gets boos around the place. So you're right with that. People say, go eat a steak, what's the matter with you? So I decided that was a healthy way to eat. So that's what I've been doing, and only the thing is that that's about 3 years ago, and I have discovered that I'm really anemic. And so I discovered that completely by accident. And anyway, and so the doctor is saying, you need to take pills and possibly we need to inject you with stuff because this is really bad. And I'm saying, I don't like that. I've been on the internet and I've read lots and lots of stuff and I've talked to lots and lots of people and it doesn't make sense to me. I'm sure that I should be able to live a healthy lifestyle by just balancing the food without having meat. Doctor doesn't quite see it that way. So I went and talked to him. We've kind of made a compromise. It's my body, I feel. I want to be happy with what I'm putting in it. That's fair enough, isn't it? Yeah, I've got to be comfortable with it myself. So, however, I do really like my doctor. She's been my doctor for 25 years. She's this lovely Christian, yeah, I know, it's a long time. Lovely Christian lady, and she's totally gone out of her way for me in the past. And so I have decided that I should listen to her, and we're kind of compromising and we're trying some things, and we'll see how that goes. Now, where do I fit then? Here's my story. Where do I fit? What clues did I just give you? Postmodern in what way, though? That I'm arguing with my doctor? Yeah, I know. Exactly. I'm not going to listen to her just because she's my doctor. And actually, if it hadn't have been her, if another doctor had told me, I probably wouldn't have listened at all. I probably would have got to go in second opinion and probably just dug my toes in because I don't want to take pills. And that's just about all there is to it. Anything else in there? Yeah, definitely distrust and authority. And the fact that I think that I know as much as my doctor, which is actually quite stupid, isn't it, really? Just because I've been on the internet for a little while. So there was a bit of reason in there, though, in the end. I did decide that I should actually listen to my doctor, but not on the basis of her having authority, on the basis of the relationship that I had with her. That's why I listened to her. So that's just a little example of how these things actually can practically work themselves out in real life. Because, 2 generations ago, if you talk to my grandparents, they would never question their doctor. If the doctor said it, well, you just did what the doctor said. Times have changed. So we're going to go back to those 5 points that I've outlined, the 5 points. What we really need to talk about is, so what do we do with that? What does it actually look like in this world that we're in? And that's up to the wrong place altogether. So we'll just, there we go. That was meant to be up while you're having your talk. And then we are back to there. if we've learnt that postmoderns distrust authority, don't expect them to respect you based on your rank or your title or your position or your whatever. Just don't expect them to do it, because they're not going to be able to. Instead, I want to suggest that we need to replace authority with authenticity. This is just such a key word. You have to earn the right to be heard. Postmoderns will let you talk, but you're going to have to earn that right first. Postmoderns can smell agendas because they're suspicious of everything. And they will know if you're being kind to them because you just need somebody else to help on the morning tea roster, or you need to have some more kids at Sunday school. We need to just love the person, and not even love them with the agenda of bringing them to Jesus. Because if we just really love the person, and if we just already really love Jesus, that will come out automatically in the relationship. We've got to be authentic and real, show real love to people without any agenda, no strings attached. Postmoderns are fascinated with reality. Like I said before, Facebook. Reality TV, not that that's exactly real, but still it's this idea that we can kind of peep in at people and see how they cope under pressure. We want to know how they really tick. Know how they behave on Sunday when they put it on for that couple of hours? People want to know what we're really made of. We've got to be vulnerable to do that. That's what an authentic relationship is like. I got to go to an officers' councils a couple of years ago. Now, I'm not an officer, but they had no one to play the piano, so I got to go along and sit in, and it was really good. And they had a speaker from Laidlaw College who nobody knew. And he could have got up at the beginning of his talk and said, I have a PhD, I've written all these books, I've done all this amazing stuff in overseas mission, but he didn't. He stood there at the beginning in this room of people who did not know him at all, and he said, ask me anything. And people asked him about his sports and which team he supported, and people asked him some questions about politics. And then somebody who had read his bio said, tell us about what it was like when your baby died. And everyone went, that was a little bit personal. And he answered the question. And he was honest, and he was real, and he was so vulnerable, and he did not try and make himself sound like super Christian. He just told it as it was, and it was such a powerful thing because he instantly got the respect of that room full of people because he was honest and vulnerable, and we hung on his every word. Replace authority with authenticity. Postmoderns have said no one story could possibly explain everything. That is too simple. And that's a huge threat to the church because we do believe we have a really good story, don't we? But there are two really positive things that come out of this idea of the death of the meta-narrative. The Bible is now seen as one story amongst many, but it's seen as a valid story. Remember, all stories have been brought on this one level, and the biblical story is there. It has a right to be there. It has a right to be heard as much as any other story. Postmoderns applaud complete openness. They are open to new ideas. They are very interested in spiritual ideas. Spirituality is hot, religion is not. So if we can connect with them on a spiritual but not religious level, there will often be a huge openness to the biblical story. And we can encourage people to just start reading the Bible, and you don't have to presume that the Bible is the Word of God to appreciate it. Just start where you are. See what you find. The Holy Spirit works out all of these things beyond what we can ever do anyway. Just encourage them to be open to it. The death of the big story has meant that the little stories have become more important. It's meant that stories of people who throughout history have not been heard are beginning to be heard. The stories of women, of Indigenous people, of children, of mentally ill, of all kinds of groups of people who have not prior to had a voice are getting a voice. And you know what this means? It means you have a voice. because you have a story. And your story is valid, and it has as much right to be heard as anybody else's story. In the modern way of thinking, you would use apologetics to prove to people that there was a God, right? So you would use logic and reason. You would say, here is the evidence, and we'll work this through, and then you will know that there is a God. Well, for the postmodern, they don't need all that proof. That just isn't so relevant for them. So we are seeing a decrease in the way apologetics is used, and what is taking its place is the power of the story. People just want you to say, well, this is how it was for me. You don't have to prove it. It's your story, and it is a powerful tool that you have. For postmoderns, things don't have to be certain.
But don't in the end you end up with a whole lot of stories
Yes, you can do. You can do, but I believe that God is bigger than that. And if we understand how the postmodern works, yes, it is only one story of many, but like I said, it has a right to be there and it has a right to be heard, and so that puts it out on us an appropriate way to share it. And we can trust God for the rest of it. We could talk about that some more a little bit later. So postmoderns, what I'm saying, they're disenchanted with certainty. You don't have to be certain. You don't have to worry about putting things in nice, neat boxes. But Christians, we often come across as being very certain. The Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it. If you say that to a postmodern, they might want to punch you in the face. That is not a helpful thing to say because it speaks of blind acceptance. And postmoderns want to question. They don't want to be gullible. They don't want to be taken in by a lie. They want to pick things apart and see, how does this really work? And I think that's quite good. I don't want to be gullible. I don't want to believe a lie. I want to suggest that both as the church and as individuals, we need to provide spaces where people can ask those questions, where they can come with their uncertainty and not be judged, where they can ask the hard questions without people freaking out. And I'm talking about people inside the church and outside the church, because if we're honest, pretty sure that everyone, even if you've been a Christian for 40 or 50 years, you've still got questions. But perhaps we feel we're not allowed to ask them because we're supposed to have it all worked out by now. Christians are people of faith. And the very nature of faith is that it is not certainty. Faith is believing without seeing. This word believe has its root in the word belove, and it's a word about the heart. Often when we think of believe, we're thinking about a list of doctrines that we tick off and we give intellectual assent to this. I believe this in my mind, I believe this in my mind. But this idea of believing is related to loving something, to embracing something and holding it close to us. And so that's what we do as Christians in our faith. We say, I don't have all the answers either, but I choose still to embrace Jesus and to put my trust in him. And so as the postmodern stands with all these questions and uncertainty, we can stand beside them and humbly say, I haven't got it all worked out either. Postmoderns are directed by self-interest. And we've just talked about having places where they can have their voice heard. There are real practical things that we can do to enable them to feel like they're contributing, not just in a token way, but really being part of the process. Postmoderns are consumers. They want their things and their options and their technology, and there's practical stuff that all you creative people can think about as to how we can incorporate that kind of thing. But postmoderns know, and we know, that you can have all the stuff and it still ultimately is not what makes you feel good. It's why we're still buying more stuff. We're wanting to do more exciting things, but we know that in the end, that is not what makes us whole as people. And so here, I think the answer simply is that we need to model something different. It's not just about telling people. The best communication that you actually do is the way that you live your life. People will see where you spend your time and where you spend your money and what your conversation's about and where your energy goes. We can show them something different. That wholeness, both now and in the next life, is found in God through Jesus. And finally, this desire for community. This is crying out for the church to fill it. People are wanting to belong and feel accepted, and this is such a wonderful opportunity for the church, but it means we're going to need to rethink what church even looks like if we want it to be relevant for them. If we want it to fit and to communicate with them, we've got to be thinking and being creative about how we're doing it. We need grace-filled environments where you can belong before you believe. Places where no question is a silly question, and where no one has all the right answers. Key is that it's a place where meaningful relationships are formed, and over time people will be held accountable. Places where there is hope for this life and the next. Postmoderns do want to make a difference now, but we don't know if we can. Postmoderns stand with the oppressed people, because they want to bring everybody up to the same level, and there's a real interest, and you will have seen it, and slavery and other things that are happening around the world. We care about those people. We want to stand with them. And as the Salvation Army, we can give opportunity for people to be part of that and to bring hope into this world now, and to be part of a community that does have hope now and in the next life. The desire for community the church can fill. The self-interest, the church can model something different. This disenchantment with certainty, the church can stand beside people and say, I don't know it all either. When it comes to the death of the meta-narrative, it means you have permission to share your story. And because there is such distrust in authority, it gives me the reason to invest in authentic relationships. I hope you can make some connections now with what I've just said and with what you do in your life. Maybe you've thought, oh, now I know why that works. Maybe you've thought, maybe I could change my approach on this thing. I want to give you 5 or 10 minutes now to talk about that and to just think about the people that you interact with. Think about where they're coming from. Think about how this stuff might be relevant for you. So have a chat. So we know where we're heading. We know that we want to bring everybody to Jesus, right? And hopefully we've got some good thinking to aid us as we try to bring people there. We've talked about the theory, but ultimately this is completely a spiritual matter. Well, no, not completely, but it is. Well, spiritual things are in everything, I suppose. But what I'm trying to say is I've given you the theory, but there's this whole spiritual side of it that I haven't touched on. And so I need to acknowledge that, we can do all the right things, can't we? We can think we're following, all the steps that we should do, but it is God who brings people to him. And so I just want to finish this session now by praying. Will you join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful and complex world that we are part of. I want to thank you for the story of each person here, for the things that they are involved in and the people that they are connected to. I want to thank you that you do have a big story and that every single person is invited to join you in it. We thank you that your story is one of hope, and we want so much that other people in this world would know that hope also that we've found. God, we want to be your agents to this world, and so we invite your Holy Spirit to work through us. Lord, please give us your creativity. Help us to think outside the square, to see the possibilities and to have the courage to try new things. God, would you give us ears to listen to you, but also to listen to the voices of those around us. God, empower us to make a difference in this world, because I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.